The Deep Space Monitoring Station orbiting Kepler 442b detected at first a massive energy signature emerging from the void between galaxies. Commander Zethkar of the Galactic Coalition flicked his serpentine tongue across his lips as he studied the readings. The signature was unlike anything in their databases, yet something about it felt disturbingly familiar. "Sir, the object is decelerating from faster-than-light speeds," reported his communications officer, a four-armed Veltani whose crystalline skin pulsed with nervous energy. It's huge. Easily 3 kilometers in length." Zethkar's scaled brow furrowed. 3 kilometers was larger than most Coalition dreadnoughts. Only the ancient extinct species had built vessels of such magnitude, and they had been wiped out centuries ago. Origin? Unknown, sir. But the trajectory suggests it came from the Forbidden Sector. A chill ran down Zethkar's spine. The Forbidden Sector, where the humans had once lived. Where the Coalition had systematically eliminated every trace of their civilization 47 years ago. The humans had been a young species, barely 2 centuries into space travel when the Coalition discovered them. They had shown promise, perhaps too much promise. Their rapid technological advancement and aggressive expansion had threatened the established order. The decision to exterminate humanity had been swift and absolute. Every human colony, every ship, every outpost had been reduced to cosmic dust. Or so they had believed. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission." The main display flickered to life, revealing a figure that made every being on the bridge freeze in terror. A human face stared back at them, weathered, scarred, with eyes that burned with cold fury. Behind him, the bridge of his vessel was visible, a masterwork of technology that seemed impossibly advanced. "Greetings, Galactic Coalition," the human said, his voice calm but carrying an undertone that promised violence. "My name is Admiral Sarah Chen, last commanding officer of the Human Defense Fleet. I bring you a message from the grave." Zethkar found his voice. "Impossible. The humans were eliminated." "You made certain of nothing," Chen interrupted. "You destroyed our worlds, murdered our children, scattered our fleets to the cosmic winds. But you missed something. You missed the Exodus fleet." The Admiral's image leaned forward, and Zethkar could see the bridge around her more clearly. Humans moved with purpose at their stations, but these were not the same humans the Coalition had fought decades ago. These were harder, leaner, with augmentations and scars that spoke of years in the unforgiving void. Their equipment pulsed with unknown energy, their weapons systems beyond anything in Coalition databases. 47 years, Chen continued. 47 years we spent in the dark between galaxies, rebuilding, evolving, preparing. We became something more than we were. Something you created through your cruelty." The display shifted to show the exterior of Chen's vessel. It was a hybrid of human engineering and something else, something that made the advanced Coalition technology look primitive by comparison. The hull seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal, covered in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Weapon ports opened like hungry mouths, revealing energy cannons that crackled with barely contained power. "This is the UCS Nemesis," Chen announced. "The last ship of the last fleet of the last free humans. But we are no longer merely human." Zethkar's tactical officer, a massive insectoid thrak, chittered in alarm. "Sir, sensors are detecting massive energy buildups across their hull. Whatever those weapons are, they're charging for firing." "Admiral Chen," Zethkar said, fighting to keep the fear from his voice. "What do you want?" Chen's smile was cold as the void. "Justice. Retribution. The complete and utter destruction of every being that participated in our genocide." She paused, letting the words sink in. "But I am not unreasonable. Surrender this station and all its personnel to me, and I will make your deaths quick. You're one ship against the entire Coalition fleet." Zethkar snarled, his composure finally breaking. "Even with your improvements, you cannot hope to." The transmission cut off. For a moment, the bridge was silent except for the hum of electronics and the nervous breathing of the crew. Then, alarms began to wail. "Sir! They're firing!" The main display showed the Nemesis unleashing hell. Beams of pure energy, unlike anything the Coalition had ever seen, lanced across space. They struck the monitoring station's shields and simply passed through them as if they didn't exist. The station's hull, made of the strongest materials known to galactic science, began to dissolve where the beams touched it. "Shields are useless," screamed the tactical officer. "The weapons are phasing through our defenses." Zethkar watched in horror as sections of his station simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, erased, as if they had never been. The Nemesis moved with impossible grace for such a massive vessel, its weapons carving through the station's superstructure with surgical precision. "Evacuate all personnel," Zethkar ordered. "Send a priority transmission to High Command. Tell them," his words were cut off as one of the Nemesis's beams swept across the communications array. The massive antenna complex didn't explode, it simply faded away into nothingness. Emergency lighting bathed the bridge in red as life support systems began to fail. Through the chaos, Zethkar saw escape pods launching from the dying station. But the human ship wasn't targeting them. Shen had given her word about quick deaths, and, apparently, she intended to keep it. The bridge's main support beam groaned as the Nemesis's weapons found their mark. Cracks spider-webbed across the reinforced transparasteel viewing port. Zethkar found himself staring directly at the human warship as it glided past the wreckage of what had been the Coalition's most advanced monitoring station. In the ship's observation deck, he could see figures watching the destruction. Humans, yes, but changed. Some bore cybernetic enhancements that glowed with eldritch energy. Others seemed to phase in and out of reality itself. All of them watched the station's death with expressions of grim satisfaction. A new transmission crackled through the emergency communications system. Admiral Chen's face appeared again, but now she was standing in what appeared to be a war room. Behind her, tactical displays showed the positions of every Coalition fleet, every base, every populated world. "Commander Zethkar," she said, and somehow she knew his name. "You are about to die, but before you do, I want you to understand something. We learned much in our exile. We discovered races and technologies that exist beyond your small corner of the galaxy. We forged alliances with beings that consider your Coalition nothing more than noisy children playing with dangerous toys." The station shuddered as another section was carved away. Through the failing life support systems, Zethkar could hear the screams of his crew echoing through the corridors. "We also learned patience," Chen continued. 47 years of planning. 47 years of preparing for this moment. We know the location of every Coalition world, the strength of every fleet, the names of every leader who voted for our extermination." Zethkar's communications officer managed to gasp out a question. What do you want from us?" Chen's expression didn't change. "Everything. Your worlds, your fleets, your civilization, all of it will burn. But, unlike you, we will not commit genocide. Your people will live, but, as servants to those they sought to destroy. They will know what it means to be hunted, to be driven from their homes, to watch their children die." The final beam from the Nemesis swept across the station's command center. As the bridge began to dissolve around him, Zethkar's last sight was of Admiral Chen's cold eyes staring back at him through the transmission. "Welcome to the age of human retribution," she said softly. The monitoring station of Kepler 442b died in silence, its wreckage drifting in the eternal night. The Nemesis hung motionless among the debris for several minutes, its sensors scanning for survivors. Finding none, it began to move again, accelerating toward the inner systems of Coalition space. In the ship's command center, Admiral Chen stood before a massive holographic display showing the galaxy. Red markers indicated Coalition strongholds, while blue markers showed the positions of other human survivors, refugees, and exiles who had managed to escape the genocide through luck or cunning. "Signal the fleet," she ordered. Around her, officers began working at consoles that seemed to blend technology with something far more exotic. "All ships are to proceed to designated rally points. Operation Lazarus begins now." "Admiral," called her first officer, a woman whose left arm had been replaced with something that wasn't quite mechanical and wasn't quite biological. "The deep space communication array is picking up transmissions across Coalition space. They're mobilizing their fleets." Chen smiled grimly. "Let them come. They destroyed our worlds with overwhelming numbers and superior firepower. We'll return the favor, but we'll do it properly. She gestured to the holographic display, which zoomed in on a sector near the galaxy's core. Target Vegan Prime first. It's their largest military shipyard and the command center for their northern fleet. We'll reduce it to atoms, then move on to Thractos. By the time we're finished with their industrial worlds, they'll be begging for the quick death we denied their predecessors. The bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. These humans had spent nearly half a century in exile, their numbers drastically reduced, but their resolve hardened into something unbreakable. They had lost everything once. They would not lose again. As the Nemesis entered hyperspace, leaving only cooling debris behind, its transmission arrays began broadcasting a message across all coalition frequencies. The message was simple, but it carried implications that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Remnant Fleet. We have returned from exile to reclaim what was stolen from us. To those who participated in our genocide, know that your time is ending. To those who stood by and allowed it to happen, know that we do not forget. To the innocent beings caught in the crossfire, we offer this choice: stand with us against tyranny, or burn with those who practice it. The message repeated across hundreds of frequencies, in dozens of languages. But its meaning was clear in any tongue: humanity had returned, and they had brought war with them. In Coalition High Command on Rigel Prime, emergency sessions began immediately. Fleet admirals argued over deployment strategies while intelligence officers scrambled to understand how a single human ship had destroyed one of their most heavily defended monitoring stations. But they were thinking like the old coalition, the one that had faced primitive human ships with chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. They were not prepared for what humanity had become in its exile: something harder, stranger, and infinitely more dangerous than what they had destroyed 47 years ago. The age of human retribution had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Corvash slammed his fist against the tactical display, causing several junior officers to flinch. The massive draconian scales rippled with fury as he stared at the readouts from the Vegan Prime system. Where once stood the Coalition's most impressive military shipyard, now only a field of twisted metal and cooling plasma remained. Impossible, he growled, his voice echoing through the command center of the Coalition flagship Dominion. One ship destroyed an entire system's defenses and 47 capital ships. His intelligence chief, a thin Aquilon whose gills fluttered nervously, approached with a data tablet. Sir, the attack patterns were unlike anything we've seen. The human vessel phased in and out of normal space, striking from multiple dimensions simultaneously. Our ships couldn't target something that existed in 7 different realities at once. Corvash studied the tactical recordings, watching helplessly as the Nemesis had carved through the Coalition fleet like a predator among prey. The human ship's weapons had evolved beyond conventional energy projection. They seemed to reach across space itself, bypassing shields and armor to strike at the molecular level. How many survivors? Fewer than 3,000, sir. From a system that housed over 40 million beings. The intelligence chief's voice was barely above a whisper. Admiral, the humans, they didn't just destroy the shipyard. They disintegrated the orbital platforms, vaporized the defense stations, and left warning beacons around the wreckage. Corvash's blood ran cold. Warning beacons? Messages for any Coalition ship that approaches. The same transmission, repeated in every known language: this is what happens to those who murder children. Turn back or join them. The bridge fell silent. Every being present remembered the human genocide. Most had considered it a necessary action against a rapidly expanding aggressive species. None had imagined the consequences would return to haunt them decades later. Sir, called the communications officer, we're receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Chen's ship. She wants to negotiate. Corvash straightened his massive frame. Perhaps there was still hope for a diplomatic solution. Put her through. The main display activated, showing Admiral Chen standing in what appeared to be a war memorial. Behind her, holographic images of destroyed human worlds rotated slowly, each one labeled with casualty figures. The numbers were staggering: billions of lives lost in the Coalition's systematic extermination campaign. Admiral Corvash, Chen said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. I understand you've seen the remains of Vegan Prime. Admiral Chen, Corvash replied carefully. Surely we can discuss. There is nothing to discuss, Chen interrupted. But, there are terms to be stated. I'm transmitting coordinates to 17 coalition worlds. You have 72 hours to evacuate all civilian populations from those systems. Corvash felt his heart skip a beat. 17 worlds, that was nearly half the coalition's industrial base. Admiral, those worlds house over 30 billion beings. It's impossible to evacuate, the same impossible task you gave humanity 47 years ago, Chen said coldly. The only difference is I'm giving you a chance to save your civilians. My people weren't afforded that luxury. Behind Chen, new images appeared. These showed human vessels, but they were unlike the Nemesis. Smaller, more numerous, and bearing weapon signatures that made Corvash's tactical computers issue error warnings. The Coalition had been watching for one ship. They hadn't considered that the Nemesis might just be the herald of something much larger. How many ships? Corvash asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Enough, Chen replied. We spent 47 years building, Admiral. While your people celebrated our extinction, we learned from species that consider your coalition's technology primitive. We forged weapons from dark matter, ships that exist partially outside reality, and soldiers who have transcended the limitations of mere flesh. The display shifted again, showing human troops training aboard the massive vessels. But these weren't the humans the coalition remembered. Some bore cybernetic enhancements that seemed to blend seamlessly with their biology. Others appeared to phase in and out of visibility, as if they existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. All of them moved with lethal precision that spoke of decades of preparation. We also recruited, Chen continued. Did you know there are 47 species in this galaxy that the Coalition either conquered or destroyed? Some survived in hiding. Others fled beyond your reach. All of them remember Coalition justice. They've been waiting for someone strong enough to challenge your empire. Corvash realized with growing horror that humanity hadn't just survived, they had built an alliance. The species the Coalition thought extinct or scattered had been regrouping, preparing for revenge under human leadership. What do you want? He asked. I want to watch your civilization burn, Chen said simply. I want every Coalition leader who voted for our extermination to experience what it means to watch their worlds die. I want your people to understand what it feels like to be hunted across the galaxy with nowhere to hide. She paused, and, when she spoke again, her voice carried a terrible finality. But, I am not you. I will not commit genocide. Your people will live as slaves, as servants, as reminders of what happens when you underestimate humanity's capacity for survival and growth. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Corvash staring at a blank screen. Around him, the bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, trying to coordinate the evacuation of 17 worlds while simultaneously preparing the Coalition's remaining fleets for war. Sir, called his tactical officer, long-range sensors are detecting massive hyperspace signatures throughout Coalition space. At least 300 vessels, all bearing the energy patterns we saw from the Nemesis. 300 ships. The Coalition's total military fleet numbered just over 400 vessels, but most were scattered across dozens of systems. If the humans struck multiple targets simultaneously, the Coalition couldn't concentrate enough firepower to mount an effective defense. Corvash activated the fleet-wide communication system. All Coalition vessels, this is Admiral Corvash aboard the Dominion. Implement Protocol 7. All ships are to converge on the Rigel system for a final defensive action. Protocol 7 was the Coalition's last resort, the complete abandonment of outlying systems to concentrate all military assets around the capital worlds. It had never been used because it essentially meant surrendering most of their territory to the enemy. But, as reports began flooding in from across Coalition space, Corvash realized they had no choice. Human ships were appearing in system after system, each one more powerful than anything the Coalition could field. Their weapons ignored shields, their hulls resisted all conventional attacks, and their tactics showed an understanding of Coalition weaknesses that could only come from decades of careful study. The evacuation of the 17 targeted worlds proceeded with desperate efficiency. Coalition civilian transports worked around the clock, ferrying billions of beings to safety. But, as the 72-hour deadline approached, it became clear that they wouldn't save everyone. On Fractos Prime, one of the targeted worlds, citizens crowded into evacuation centers while Coalition engineers tried desperately to dismantle the planet's massive industrial complexes. The world was home to the Coalition's primary weapons manufacturing facilities. Losing it would cripple their ability to replace losses in the coming war. General Vorthak, the system's military commander, watched from his command bunker as the last transport ships lifted off from the planet's surface. They had managed to evacuate 80% of the civilian population, but millions remained stranded. The industrial complexes were simply too vast to dismantle in the time available. "Sir," reported his aide, a young Centauri whose blue skin had paled with stress, "hyperspace signatures detected at the edge of the system. Multiple vessels, human configuration." Vorthak nodded grimly. "How long until they reach the planet?" 18 minutes, sir." 18 minutes to watch the death of one of the Coalition's most important worlds. Vorthak activated the planetary communication system, broadcasting on all emergency frequencies. "Citizens of Fractos Prime," he said, his voice carrying across the planet's continents. "This is General Vorthak. The human fleet has arrived. To those who couldn't reach the evacuation centers, find shelter in the deepest bunkers available. To my soldiers, remember that we defend not just our world, but our way of life. Make them pay for every kilometer." The first human ships appeared on the horizon like dark stars against the orange sky of Fractos. They moved with supernatural grace, their hulls reflecting light in patterns that seemed to bend reality itself. As they descended through the atmosphere, the planet's defense grid opened fire. Massive particle cannons, designed to stop entire fleets, focused their energy on the leading human vessels. The beams struck their target's dead center and passed harmlessly through them. The ships continued their descent as if the planet's most powerful weapons were nothing more than light rain. In the planetary command center, Vorthak watched his weapons officers frantically adjust frequencies and power levels. Nothing seemed to affect the human ships. They existed, they were clearly there, but they seemed immune to all forms of conventional attack. "General," called his communications officer, "the human flagship is transmitting." Admiral Chen's image appeared on the main screen, but now she was wearing what appeared to be power armor that seemed to be alive. It flowed across her form like liquid metal, pulsing with energy that hurt to look at directly. Behind her, Vorthak could see the bridge of her ship, and the view made him understand just how outmatched they truly were. The human crew worked at stations that seemed to exist partially in other dimensions. Their equipment responded to thought rather than physical input. Some of the officers bore modifications that were clearly alien in origin, technologies borrowed from species the Coalition had never encountered. "General Vorthak," Chen said, "your defense grid is impressive. Primitive, but impressive. However, you're fighting with last century's weapons against next century's fleet." "Admiral," Vorthak replied, fighting to keep his voice steady, "there are still civilians on this planet. Surely you won't kill innocents?" Chen finished. "No, General. We are not you. But this world's industrial capacity must be eliminated. It has produced the weapons used to massacre my people. Justice demands its destruction." The human ships reached the planet's surface and began their work. But, instead of the massive explosions Vorthak expected, the factories and manufacturing centers simply began to fade away. The human weapons didn't destroy, they erased, removing matter from reality itself. Within hours, Fractos Prime's industrial might have been reduced to empty plains. The cities remained untouched, the civilian areas undamaged, but the military and industrial infrastructure had been completely eliminated. It was surgical destruction on a planetary scale. "Your world is now strategically irrelevant," Chen announced. "Your people may remain and rebuild, but any attempt to restore military production will be met with complete annihilation. This is the mercy humanity shows to those who surrender." As the human fleet departed, General Vorthak surveyed the transformed landscape of his world. In the space of a single day, one of the Coalition's most powerful industrial centers had been rendered helpless. Worse, they had been unable to inflict even minor damage on the human vessels. Similar scenes played out across 16 other Coalition worlds. Industrial centers vanished, military installations evaporated, orbital defenses simply ceased to exist. In each case, civilian populations were spared, but the coalition's military and economic infrastructure was systematically eliminated. By the time the 72 hours had passed, the coalition had lost nearly 40% of its industrial capacity and most of its strategic reserves. Hundreds of billions of beings had been displaced, their worlds transformed from centers of power into helpless dependencies. But, perhaps most terrifying of all was the message that accompanied each attack. In every case, Admiral Chen had made it clear that this was only the beginning. Humanity had returned from exile, changed, evolved, and allied with forces the coalition couldn't even comprehend. The age of coalition dominance was ending, and the age of human ascendance had begun. The coalition High Council chamber on Rigel Prime had never seen such chaos. Representatives from dozens of species argued frantically as holographic displays showed the systematic destruction of their empire. In the 3 weeks since Admiral Chen's ultimatum, the human fleet had eliminated every major military installation in coalition space. Chancellor Morvek, an ancient Altarian whose crystalline form had dimmed with age and stress, called for order as the council descended into panic. "Silence," he commanded, his telepathic voice echoing in every mind present. "We must focus on finding a solution." "What solution?" roared Ambassador Grex, the massive Ursoid representative whose fur bristled with fury. "They have weapons that ignore our shields, ships that exist in multiple dimensions, and allies we didn't even know existed. Half our fleet has been destroyed without inflicting a single casualty on their forces." Defense Minister Telek, a thin insectoid whose compound eyes reflected the destruction reports, clicked his mandibles nervously. "The situation is worse than that. They're not just destroying our military assets, they're recruiting our own people. 17 coalition member species have formally declared independence and joined the Human Alliance." The revelation sent another wave of panic through the chamber. The coalition had maintained control through superior technology and military might. With both advantages gone, their empire was crumbling from within as oppressed species saw an opportunity for freedom. Chancellor Morvek studied the tactical displays with growing despair. The human fleet had grown to over 800 vessels, each one more powerful than the coalition's best dreadnoughts. More disturbing were the reports of human soldiers who seemed to possess abilities that defied known science, warriors who could phase through solid matter, strategists who could predict enemy movements with impossible accuracy, and commanders who appeared to communicate telepathically across vast distances. "Sir," interrupted Communications Director Yenth, her aquatic features pale with fear, "we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Chen. She's requesting permission to address the High Council directly." The chamber fell silent. For 3 weeks, Chen had communicated only through ultimatums and battlefield victories. A direct address to the council suggested either negotiation or final surrender terms. "Put her through," Morvek said quietly. The main display activated, showing Admiral Chen standing in what appeared to be a vast cathedral-like space aboard her flagship. The chamber behind her stretched for kilometers, filled with beings from dozens of species, some recognizable as former coalition subjects, others completely alien. All bore expressions of grim determination. "Honorable Chancellor," Chen began, her voice carrying easily through the chamber's acoustics. "I stand before you not as a conqueror, but as the representative of justice long delayed." Morvek leaned forward in his chair. "Admiral Chen, surely we can reach some accommodation?" Chen's expression hardened. "Did my people receive accommodation when your fleet surrounded Earth? Was accommodation offered when coalition forces hunted human children through the ruins of New Geneva?" Behind her, a holographic display showed images of the human genocide. Burning cities, refugee ships destroyed while fleeing, coalition forces systematically eliminating human colonies. The evidence was overwhelming and damning. "That was a military necessity," Defense Minister Telek protested. Humanity was expanding too rapidly, threatening established territories. Humanity was exploring empty systems and establishing peaceful colonies, Chen interrupted. "We never attacked coalition territory. We never enslaved other species. Our only crime was growing too quickly for your comfort." She gestured to the beings assembled behind her. "But your genocide taught us valuable lessons. We learned that mercy is seen as weakness. We learned that diplomacy means nothing to those who possess superior firepower. Most importantly, we learned that sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to become stronger than they are. Chancellor Morveck felt hope slipping away. What do you want from us? Justice, Chen replied simply. Complete and total justice for the crimes committed against humanity and the dozens of species your empire has subjugated over the centuries. The display shifted to show a comprehensive list that made several council members gasp in shock. Hundreds of species, thousands of worlds, all documented cases of coalition aggression, subjugation, or extinction. The evidence had been compiled over decades, creating an indictment that was impossible to deny. These are the terms of humanity's justice, Chen announced. The coalition government will dissolve immediately. All military forces will surrender to human command. The surviving leadership will stand trial for crimes against sentient life. All subjugated species will be granted immediate independence and reparations. Ambassador Grex slammed his massive fist on the table. Impossible. The coalition spans half the galaxy. We have billions of citizens, hundreds of worlds, all of which will be better served by governments that represent their actual interests rather than your imperial ambitions, Chen said coldly. We have no intention of ruling your people, Ambassador. We intend to free them from your rule. Defense Minister Telek's eyes narrowed. And if we refuse these terms? Chen's smile was colder than the void between stars. Then, we will implement them by force. Your military cannot oppose us, your worlds cannot hide from us, and your people increasingly support us. The age of the coalition is over. The only question is whether it ends through surrender or total annihilation. The transmission ended, leaving the council in stunned silence. Around them, Aide whispered frantically as they tried to process the implications of Chen's ultimatum. She's bluffing, Telek insisted. They can't possibly occupy half the galaxy with 800 ships. Chancellor Morveck shook his head slowly. She doesn't need to occupy anything. Look at the reports from our remaining worlds. Government facilities are being abandoned, military units are deserting, and local populations are declaring independence faster than we can respond. It was true. The coalition was collapsing from within as species that had been subjugated for centuries saw an opportunity for freedom. The human fleet had become a symbol of hope for the oppressed and a harbinger of doom for the oppressors. Sir, called an aide, priority transmission from Admiral Corvash. The Rigel Defense Fleet is requesting immediate assistance. They're under attack by human forces. Through the chamber's observation windows, the council members could see the orbital battle unfolding above their world. The coalition's most powerful fleet was engaging the human forces in a desperate last stand, but, even from the planet's surface, it was clear the battle was hopeless. Human ships moved through the coalition formation like predators among prey. Their weapons reached across impossible distances, their hulls shrugged off the most powerful attacks, and their tactics demonstrated a level of coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Chancellor, Admiral Corvash's voice crackled over the communication system. They're not just defeating us, they're studying us. Every attack we make, they counter perfectly. It's as if they can predict our every move. On the tactical display, Morveck watched the last of the coalition fleet being systematically dismantled. The human vessels showed no urgency, no desperation. They moved with the confidence of beings who had already won and were simply completing a necessary task. All ships, Corvash reported grimly, they're offering surrender terms. Crews who abandon their vessels will be taken prisoner and treated according to galactic conventions. Those who continue fighting will be eliminated. One by one, coalition vessels powered down their weapons and surrendered. The few that continued fighting were simply erased from existence, their crews given no opportunity to reconsider. Within hours, the space above Rigel Prime was controlled entirely by human forces. The Nemesis itself descended through the atmosphere, accompanied by a fleet of smaller vessels that established a blockade around the planet. Members of the High Council, Chen's voice echoed through the chamber as her ships took position overhead. You have 6 hours to prepare for formal surrender ceremonies. Any attempt to flee or resist will be met with immediate and overwhelming force. Chancellor Morveck looked around the chamber at his fellow council members. These beings had once commanded an empire spanning thousands of worlds and trillions of subjects. Now they sat helplessly as their civilization crumbled around them. How did they become so powerful? Whispered Ambassador Grex. Defense Minister Telek pulled up intelligence reports they had been studying for weeks. According to our analysis, they made contact with species from outside our galaxy, ancient civilizations with technology we can barely comprehend. They learned from them, adapted their knowledge, and, then, improved upon it. But, more than that, Morvac added quietly, they learned from us. Every battle we fought against them 47 years ago, every tactic we used, every weakness we exploited, they studied it all and became immune to our strategies. The truth was becoming clear. The Coalition's victory over humanity had been Pyrrhic in the extreme. By driving humans to the edge of extinction, they had forced them to evolve beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The survivors had emerged from exile not as refugees, but as the most formidable military force the galaxy had ever known. Sir, called an aide, Admiral Chen's shuttle has landed at the government complex. She's requesting an immediate meeting with the full council. Morvac straightened his crystalline form and tried to maintain some dignity in defeat. Very well. Let us face the consequences of our actions. The council chamber doors opened to admit Admiral Chen and her escort. But the beings who entered were unlike anything the Coalition had expected. Chen herself appeared almost unchanged from the transmission, but her companions defied easy categorization. Some were clearly human in origin but bore modifications that seemed to blend technology with biology in ways that shouldn't have been possible. Others appeared to be representatives of the alien species humanity had allied with, beings of such advanced development that their mere presence seemed to warp reality around them. Honorable Council, Chen said, her voice carrying absolute authority, I come before you not in vengeance, but in justice. For 47 years, you have believed your crimes were forgotten. Today, you learn that justice delayed is not justice denied. She gestured to one of her companions, a being that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. When it spoke, its words bypassed the ears entirely and resonated directly in the minds of all present. The species you sought to exterminate has transcended your primitive understanding of existence, the entity communicated. They have become something greater than the sum of their parts, a synthesis of biological evolution, technological advancement, and cosmic awareness that represents the next stage in galactic development. Chancellor Morvac found his voice. What will happen to our people? Chen's expression softened slightly. Your people will be free, many for the first time in centuries. The Coalition's imperial structure will be dismantled, but its constituent species will be offered the chance to join a new galactic confederation based on cooperation rather than domination. And us? Asked Defense Minister Telek. You will face trial for your crimes, Chen replied. But you will receive the fair treatment that humanity was denied. Evidence will be presented, arguments will be heard, and justice will be rendered according to law rather than convenience. She paused, looking around the chamber at the beings who had once ruled half the galaxy. The age of empires built on oppression is ending. In its place will rise a civilization based on cooperation, understanding, and mutual respect. Humanity has returned to the galaxy not as conquerors, but as liberators. Outside the chamber, celebrations were beginning on worlds across former Coalition space. Species that had been subjugated for generations were declaring independence, forming new alliances, and embracing a future free from imperial domination. The human fleet dispersed throughout the galaxy, not as an occupying force, but as peacekeepers ensuring the transition to freedom proceeded smoothly. Their technology, once focused on weapons of war, was redirected toward healing the wounds of centuries of oppression. Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck of the Nemesis, watching as Rigel Prime's population began the process of building a new government. Around her, her crew worked to coordinate relief efforts across dozens of worlds. Admiral, called her first officer, were receiving requests for assistance from over 200 systems. Former Coalition subjects seeking help in establishing independent governments. Chen nodded. Grant them all. We didn't endure 47 years in exile just to become the next oppressive empire. Our role is to ensure that what happened to humanity never happens to another species. Behind her, the tactical displays showed human ships throughout the galaxy not as instruments of conquest, but as guardians of freedom. The Nemesis itself was being converted from a warship into a mobile embassy, its weapons replaced with diplomatic facilities and humanitarian supplies. Humanity had indeed returned from exile, transformed and empowered beyond the Coalition's worst nightmares. But they had returned not as conquerors seeking revenge, but as liberators offering justice. The galaxy would never be the same, but, for the first time in centuries, it would be truly free. The age of human retribution was ending, and the age of galactic cooperation was beginning.